is one of her favourite occupations. You do all seem to share a stubborn habit of going your own way. I can't imagine anything more exasperating for the poor dear Duchess than being saddled with such deeply ungrateful descendants as this latest generation of Seabornes. Can you, my love?" Rowena, Lady Tremaine observed wickedly, as she passed his son and heir to Sir Linstock instead of his hovering nurse, who seemed constantly surprised the child's parents were unwilling to leave him to her until he was old enough to be seen and not heard. If that day ever came in the lively Tremaine household, which Persephone doubted. The dashing baronet took his child from his lady with a rueful smile, and a shrug that admitted the wild reputation he'd once worked so hard to earn was ruined, first by his uniquely fascinating wife, and now the robust little son upon whom he clearly doted. There was a look of quiet contentment in his dark eyes Persephone had never thought she would see, and Sir Linstock gently rocked his son, as if he'd been practising to become a loving father for years. He had enjoyed a wild career as one of the worst rakes in London, until he met Rowena's laughing blue eyes one night in Mayfair, and fell flat at her daintily shod feet, like any awed boy fresh up from the country. "I expect the Duchess will shortly decide she's not being treated with the reverence she deserves, and demand to be taken home at a breakneck pace she would find deplorable in anyone else," he observed laconically. "Her coachman is probably supervising the harnessing of his team as we speak, in anticipation of his call to duty." Persephone laughed, but as she chatted easily with the wider Pendle family and enjoyed their witty but never vicious byplay, she wondered why the idea of even so close a marriage as Rowena's with her Sir Linstock left her shivering. She was nearly 22 now, and should make a creditable alliance, if only to stop her mother worrying about at least one of her children. Yet she hadn't met one gentleman she could endure being tied to for life during 3 successful seasons in town. Another shiver ran through her at the thought of meeting her imaginary groom in their nuptial chamber on their wedding night, to trust him with so much of her true self. It was her parents' fault, she decided, picturing her father and mother together, and knowing how desperately hard Lady Henry's life had become without her beloved husband to share it with. Like swans, Seabornes seemed fated to pair for life, with the notable exception of her grandfather. That famously raffish gentleman married for money and kept a succession of exotically lovely mistresses once the heir and a spare had filled the Ashburton nurseries with their robust cries. Persephone often wondered if her husband's careless infidelity was the reason for Grandmamma Dettingham's famous irritability, even so many years after his death. Despite his ramshackle example, the idea of marrying for less than love made Persephone shudder with distaste. She knew the intimacy of the marriage bed would never beckon her unless she was passionately in love, yet couldn't imagine actually being so. She would probably become the family quiz, but even that would be better than submitting to a husband she might grow to hate, just for the sake of children and an assured place in the world as a wife. To avoid the uncomfortable jar of fear and denial in her heart at the very thought of such a husband, she watched as groups of chattering guests drifted onto the south terrace, with its spectacular views of the distant Welsh hills one side and the rolling Herefordshire countryside the other. The vast Seaborne and Pendle clans had settled into casual groups and couples, along with Jack's friends and neighbours, and looked happy and relaxed as they exchanged news and enjoyed good company. Sir Linstock was probably right about the dowager deploring such simple pleasures, and the fact that the company didn't hang on her every word as they clearly should. Persephone met Rowena Tremaine's laughing gaze for a rueful moment when an expected stir came from the dowager's direction. A goodly part of the Pendle clan and Lady Henry Seaborne's own family moved to surround her ladyship in a protective huddle, while she did duty as Jack's hostess once again, to bid her exacting mother-in-law farewell. When the dowager finally departed,